If a kangaroo didn't have a tail, it would fall over. We're talking about counterfactuals today, and I'm going to start this off by jumping to you, Mark. What is a counterfactual?
All right, I gotta. A kangaroo doesn't have a tail.
If a kangaroo didn't have a tail, then it would fall over.
I don't know. Counterfactuals are where you, as an investigator, say something like, they did not open the valve, or the pilot wasn't aware of the height that was required for something. And so they're saying, that it was not or did not or would likely have. You're sort of making up stuff is what they're claiming. And that this made up stuff is you putting your opinions into the investigation. But I don't know if I really believe that. And then I guess the interesting thing is they say that, well, you're putting your opinions in there, but the people who were doing it, it all made sense to them when they were doing it. So it's a counterfactual is something that you put as a fact that it did not happen.
So I've had some arguments with different people in classes, primarily when we start talking about causal factors for this. And counterfactuals come up mostly because people are looking at, well, this sounds really blamey. Because when we say something like, if they had opened this valve, then this wouldn't have happened. If they had noticed this signal,
if they had opened the valve,
then the incident wouldn't have happened. If they had just noticed...
Well, that's sort of making your opinion, isn't it?
Yeah. So if they had just noticed the signal, then they could have done something about it, right? So people hear these kind of if-then statements, and as a counterfactual, and they think, hey, this is blaming the operator. And instead of thinking about the context, what conditions were they dealing with that they didn't know? You're just blaming them for not catching this mistake and fixing the problem.
Well, I think they go on beyond that, and they say, not only are you blaming the operator, but you're saying they did something that didn't make sense, and to them it made sense at the time. So you're taking your own opinion and putting it in the investigation.
Yeah, the kind of thing is, counterfactuals don't actually tell you about behaviors. They're just telling you about this utopian world where things would have went different if somebody had done something different.
I think that's a good way to put it. It kind of reminds me of like these sci-fi shows where you have alternate realities, and you've got the real world where somebody didn't do something and something bad happened. And then you think, okay, well, in this other world, everything's exactly the same, except they did it the right way. And if they did it the right way, we wouldn't have had the incident. So you're trying to create this hypothetical situation to prove that what you're saying is true.
Now,
and how does that work?
Now, I kind of tie this in when I think about why are we looking for causal factors. So if we want to think about an incident investigation and is this important or not, we want to look at, well, what's the purpose? So causal factors aren't the first step in an investigation. Some people come in with the claim of the problem with counterfactuals is it biases you to what didn't happen and doesn't focus on what did happen. And I think we would generally agree the first step is not identify causal factors. The first step in any good investigation is understanding what happened first before we start looking at what didn't happen and before we start marking down things that could have happened if we had different things in our process. We want to understand the what. So I know with TapRooT, our first step is understanding what happened, building a snap chart. But when we get to the point of actually looking at causal factors, what was the mistakes, errors, equipment failures that led to the incident, we want to start looking at things that we would have expected to happen. And I think that's where we disagree on counterfactuals with a lot of, we'll say, other theories about this, because they'll say, you're looking at things that...
Oh, no, you just said the right words. You said expected.
Yeah.
And so what you're doing is you're putting your beliefs into the system because you expected something to happen.
But that is, businesses have an expectation that certain safeguards that they've put in place are working.
Well, I want to do a simple example because this is all getting pretty up in the ether. So let's say you had a person who was aligning some valves and they were supposed to shut valve B. That's what they were supposed to do. And they wanted to do that. And they went out to the field and they grabbed a handle which they thought was B, and they shut it. But it wasn't B. Well, in that case, if you say they shut valve C and did not shut valve B, which they intended to do, that's what happened. And that's not a counterfactual, even though it says there was not something that happened, because they intended to do something and they didn't do it. I think that's different than if you say, if the pilot would have been paying attention, they would have noticed the low altitude.
So I think there's, when we classify with the 5 types, you've got mistakes and incorrect actions. And I think those don't get much argument for counterfactuals because it was an action that someone took. They opened the wrong valve.
Back to the pilot example, if they were supposed to maintain 5,000 feet and they let their altitude get down to 4,000 feet, you could say they did not maintain 5,000 feet, and that's a fact, not a counterfactual.
But I think the counterfactuals do come in more when you look at missed catches, failed catch, opportunities to catch a mistake where you go, well, the operator could have done a valve lineup, or the supervisor could have checked behind the operator. And you start to get these kind of like what if scenarios. Well, if somebody had noticed this, anybody could have noticed. And that's where I think as an investigator, you have to start looking and saying, okay, what was the expectation of what we're telling people we're doing, what we're planning on doing, versus the reality of what actually happens in the field. And I think counterfactuals are a really good way to look at how we are expecting work to occur versus reality, which as investigators is where we start to look for behaviors.
Now, does it have value in double checking that the causal factors that you're working on are truly causal factors? So if you do find somebody made a mistake, like they turned the wrong valve, and you ask yourself, okay, this was a mistake, did it really cause the incident? Is this a problem serious enough that we need to spend time and effort analyzing so we can find the underlying causes of this mistake and put corrective actions in place? So if we would ask ourselves, would this be a counterfactual? Well, if he would have turned the right valve, would we have had this accident? And does that help you kind of define, well, yes, this is a causal factor we need to spend on time analyzing? Or is it just a problem that we found that if we fix it, it really doesn't matter because it didn't cause this incident?
I think it would tie with the actual causal factor. But I think a lot of the did nots, I think back on one of the examples we kind of give just as writing for what's a condition versus an event. We talk about somebody didn't chalk a trailer's wheels. So they hook up a trailer and they don't chalk the wheels. Well, a lot of people will say that's an event because you can watch them on the video not do something. And you're like, well, no, there's a million things they didn't do. They didn't jump on one foot. They didn't, spin 3 times. The difference between an event and a condition is going to be, what actually happened? What occurred? What were the actions that were taken? And, I think oftentimes investigators get caught up on the did nots too early in the process, that they're not focusing on just collecting the what actually happened. And I think that's the point that a lot of people that talk about counterfactuals are trying to get to, is they make sure that they want you to focus on what really happened first. But I think there's a huge amount of value in actually looking and saying, okay, if I've got a valve that we're opening and we expect people to do a valve lineup, the fact that they didn't do a valve lineup is something worth us looking into deeper because we have an expectation as a business. However, speculating that if their brother had come out with them, he might have caught that they were on the wrong valve, well, that's not really very helpful. So we want to speculate in reality. We don't want to jump to nonsense.
Go back to your first example you used there, because you've made it way too long for me to respond to everything. What was your first example?
Who knows now? What's the response you were looking to do? What are you thinking about?
Okay, well, let me give you a different example.
Okay.
And it's sort of a combination of what you had. And that is, we did a valve lineup, and the guy missed the valve. He did not shut B, he shut C. And they were supposed to have a second check. But the second checker knew that Joe was always really good at these valve lineups, so he did not do
Yeah.
the second check. Now, the whole counterfactual argument is whatever he did made sense at the time.
Yeah.
And made sense in this case is he thought Joe wouldn't make a mistake. So why do I bother to go do a second check if Joe doesn't make a mistake? I think they are making an assumption there that was, why everything made sense at the time. It may not have made sense. Made sense may have been, I don't need to do this. But there's a rule that says here you're supposed to do a second check and you're going to sign it off even though you didn't do it. Well, that is not the same as it made sense.
Well, I think that's where the counterfactual will come in, because now I can ask myself, if I'm investigating this, well, if he would have done the verification, if he would have done the second check, would we have had the incident? And if we say no, that action would have prevented it, then we have a causal factor.
At least it's a lower likelihood of it, because he might have missed and got the wrong valve too. But we're assuming that if they really did the second check, this guy wouldn't have made the same mistake as the guy before, which is an assumption as well.
Yeah.
So I think there's a reasonableness to these things, because, again, an infinite number of things could have happened that could have prevented the incident. But just because
an angel could have flown down and shut the valve. But that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about things you expected to happen because there was a rule, there was a process, there was a way we trained people.
There was a safeguard in place, whether it was a weak one or not. There's something intentionally that we planned to do.
So there are things where you sort of make up things where you say, well, if he would have done that, I think this would have been the outcome, versus we have a set system of doing things that's set for a reason. We want high reliability. We know that normal reliability will not be acceptable, and therefore we have to do things in a systematic method to have the outcome we want. And therefore we establish that system, we audit that system, we train people in that system, and they know what they're supposed to do.
And I think that's the important difference with counterfactuals, and why I think they are important is because you have to recognize system failures. But I think the other side to this is you can't stop at a counterfactual in your investigation. So it's not, this operator didn't do this, therefore we punish them. That's not a default. It's the operator didn't do this. Now we have to understand the context behind that. Maybe it's the things that made sense, but also it could be there's lots of reasons somebody may or may not have followed a rule.
They were just a bad person.
No, they were just evil.
Well, and then you get into the
Moral
techniques
failing.
like 5 whys, or you need your own experience or knowledge to come up with, well, if he would have done this, we would have had a different outcome. So why didn't he do this? And then you've got to know that system really well, and you got to get lucky to really find the underlying issues instead of using something like our root cause tree and dictionary to analyze it appropriately, right? So it's still causing you to make mistakes and use your own knowledge and judgment to fix things.
Yeah,
and that doesn't work.
If you're using the 5 whys, this is a very common trap that people get stuck on. Someone made a mistake, therefore punish the person involved or retrain them. Or,
Well, I can't believe anybody would use 5 whys, so that this doesn't make any difference.
But
that's a counterfactual right there, I think.
But if they're using TapRooT, we're not going to stop at a human performance problem where someone made a mistake. That's the starting point with the root cause tree. We're going to get down to what was missing in the system that allowed it.
So
Based
I
on
think
facts.
I think what we start off with is saying what happened.
Yep.
So our snap chart, which we don't have an example of here, but if we had one, our snap chart lays out those facts of what happened. And then if he shut C, below that we'd have the counterfactual. Did not shut B. And that is actually a fact also. It's not our assumption. It's not our making up our way. We knew that B had to be shut. It was in the procedure to shut it. He was trying to shut it. He got the wrong one. He got C instead of B. So then you might look at that oval, that condition, and say, well, what could have led to that? And that's when you're starting to go off on these could have caused him to make a mistake. And that's what the root cause tree is about. What could have caused that mistake? Now, it's not necessarily 100% certain that it did cause the mistake. You might find that there were no labels on B and C, and everybody was supposed to know which valve was B and which one was C, but it was easy to get confused. Well, that's a possibility if it caused him to get the wrong one. Is it 100? Can you go back and ask the guy, why'd you pick the wrong one?
You could try.
You think he's going to have a good answer for you?
He's not going to, because
I just goofed up.
Unless it was an intentional one, and again, even then,
And then they aren't going to admit it.
they may not.
I opened C or I shut C because I wanted to cause this incident. Well, nobody's ever going to. I've never had an interview go like that.
Yeah, this isn't. We're not dealing with Jack Bauer and terrorists.
Yes, it's not going to happen. So I think that the whole argument over counterfactuals is a argument on verbiage you use while doing this. I mean, if I'm making this a simple valve mispositioning.
Yeah.
The valve was in the wrong position. That's a fact. We're trying to figure out how it got that way. And if you want to argue over the fact of he did not shut it versus he shut C, which made sense to him at the time, that's just a verbiage argument.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, again, a lot of these come out because people use techniques that don't have a logic behind them as to how you connect from someone made a mistake to a real root cause. And a lot of times, again, we think of like 5 whys as an example of this. People will stop as soon as they find that someone made an error. And they don't look at the things that set that person up for failure, not having a label. Maybe these things, they didn't have a second check in place. Maybe the system was laid out in a way that was really confusing and doesn't have good human factors. There's a lot of different things that could cause and could set this person up for success or failure. And so when you don't have that knowledge and experience of what questions to ask, you just stop as soon as you find the most satisfactory answer, which to a lot of people is as soon as I can blame someone, that's where they want to stop.
Well, as soon as you find a problem, I mean, just as we're built, we want to solve it, right? Before you really get to the analysis part, you see a problem and you start talking about fixes. Instead of really diving deep and figuring out from the training that we give, here's the questions you need to ask to get the conditions around these mistakes so we can properly analyze their behavior, why they did things, and come up with the root causes, the gaps in our systems that if fixed, it would support the guy better and he wouldn't make the same mistake. So I think that training is what they're missing because not a lot of investigators know all the questions to ask to get the evidence that's critical for a good analysis.
Now, another thing people kind of say is that hindsight's 20/20 on these. And of course, we can easily identify the opportunities for making better decisions in hindsight. So I'll give another example when we think of, again, we kind of categorize causal factors by type. And we talked about failed catches. The other one is actions that made the outcome worse. So somebody maybe took an action. Let's say the guy opens the wrong valve. And the expectation is he opens this and heads back to his control area where he's supposed to be monitoring pressures or something like that. But instead, he opens this valve and he goes to a 30-minute break. And because he had opened the wrong valve and went to a 30-minute break, well, now he didn't catch these signals that came up that he had the wrong valve, that something was happening, and the incident got worse. Well, again, probably going to break made sense to him at the time, right? I'd been this many hours. I actually had to skip my break in order to do this task really quickly. There can be information like that, but we still want to identify that opportunity as, this occurred. They went to break. Again, it's a fact they went to break. We want to change this in the future so that we don't miss these opportunities.
And so we're saying nobody was watching the gauges or whatever that was could have caught the valve misposition.
Maybe there were alarms, maybe there were signals.
But nobody was there.
So again, is it a counterfactual that they could have caught it if he had decided to skip break? Yeah. But what we're really looking at is, hey, this is a missed opportunity that we had these safeguards in place that we didn't have working the way we intended them to. And so again, it's worth analyzing and understanding that behavior, that action of leaving these things unattended.
Well, the other way to look at this, in this particular example, is no one was there to observe the things, rather than saying he shouldn't take a break. Well, does he ever get a break? Is he ever supposed? What was he doing wandering around in the field if he's supposed to be watching the gauges? Yeah. So, it's one of those, something was wrong with our system that allowed there to be unmonitored indicators that are supposed to be monitored. Yeah. And once again, I said supposed to be, which is our assumption of how it should work. But maybe that's built into the system. Why have these alarms and things if nobody's there?
And I think it's important as an investigator, we have to identify those opportunities, because that's the opportunity for real improvement in your system, because you say, hey, we've identified, we now have a system, a safeguard that's not being monitored, and they're allowed lunch, they're allowed breaks, they're going to take them. We need a system that's better than what we currently have to catch these problems.
Well, just like it made me feel different when you said the operator just went on break without going back to where he's supposed to be. When Mark said, well, no one was monitoring the instruments, that's so less blaming. That's so much focused more on systems than people doing the right thing 100% of the time.
So I think another important point with this is the way it's written. And again, this is kind of a semantic argument, an argument on verbiage.
But it matters.
But it does matter. And that's why we do try to help people with causal factors to make sure they're understanding how to write them and recognize this is not an end point in your investigation. It's just helping you categorize and group information under an action or incorrect action, or did or did not. So those kind of things make a difference, I think, in how you write and also how you respond. So again, TapRooT helps with that a lot, because it's asking you yes or no questions based on evidence. It's going to guide you to real things you can fix, and not just stop at, oh, he went to lunch, so we're gonna make a new policy about
no more lunch.
No, you can't go to break for 15 minutes after doing there's a right and an expectation to those breaks, and so we have to make sure we have a different system that can accommodate for it. Maybe it's getting somebody that covers while you're on lunch. Maybe it's having some sort of signaling that can give you information while on lunch. Who knows? The system might drive what those can be, but we want to make sure that we're recognizing those opportunities. So if somebody wants to actually learn how to do this investigation and understand counterfactuals the right way, what is the best?
You mean do good root cause analysis rather than talk all day about whether it's a counterfactual or not?
Yes. What would be their best opportunity?
5-day course.
5-day course.
5-day.
If you don't have the full 5-day, second best is going to be a 2-day course.
The 5-day TapRooT Advanced Root Cause Analysis Team Leader course is what you're looking for on the website.
And you can find those links down below. As always, we will be here to help you work through your counterfactuals and not.
Please don't.
Well, I think we should say we do not cover counterfactuals in our 5-day advanced training team leader course.
We cover causal factors, root causes, and how to actually fix real problems.
It's really all about drawing your snap chart.
It definitely is. And you'll learn all of that in the 5-day course. Check that out. Check the links out down below to find the next upcoming public course near you. We look forward to seeing you there.